Any day now. Oh, here we go. We are live. Hello, everybody. I have the lovely Miss Lunar Walks Alone with us tonight on Google Hangouts. Say hello to everybody.
Hey.
She's very nervous. I believe you've said that you started your own channel, but you haven't put up videos yet.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I've started. I'm just kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to do this because I don't want to. I don't want it to become something that is a magnet for a lot of things that I don't want to have to deal with.
Yes, that is true. So she does have a channel, but it is not, she doesn't have any videos up yet. And I'm glad that everybody could be with us. I see that we have 5 people watching so far. So I'm going to ask that everybody hold their questions until about 7:10 p.m. That's my time. So whatever time that is for you guys. Right now it is 6:11. So whatever time 7 p.m. is for you guys. Hold your questions until then, and I'll definitely be looking at chat. Until then, I will not be looking at chat because we have a few topics to discuss tonight, and I'm so blessed to have the Miss Lovely Luna Walks Alone with me tonight. So I thought I would start off with a simple question. How did you get into your craft, and what was it like starting when you started young?
Wow. Okay, this is like 40 years ago. So there's been a lot of changes over that time period. But when I started, I learned more from listening to my grandparents. They were very pagan, which was the term used back then. Pagan. They once in a great while would attend a church just to keep the neighbors happy, but for the most part, they kept to themselves and they kept to their own beliefs. I learned a lot about herbs and a lot about their uses and how to about using them in your prayers and in your intentions from them. Back then, we didn't have the witchy stores. We didn't have all the resources that we have today. So you learned a lot through just talking to someone who was practicing. I've always been a solitary, hence the name that I use. I've always been solitary. I had thought about being a part of a group at one time, but I found it too confining because whoever ran that coven or that group, they were the ones who decided what you did, what you studied, who your deity was that you were to follow. And it just what they were doing did not resonate within me and not where I should be.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have the witchy stores and things that are available today, you didn't have the ability to go online and order your supplies or whatever. We had to glean for what we had. We either grew it ourselves, or you learned how to identify the plants and the wild, what people always thought of as the weeds and things like that, but they were actually tools that we could use, and we learned to know where the patches of this plant grew or where that plant grew, and you would harvest them yourselves, and that's what you worked with. If you needed a tool for something and that you couldn't go and buy a cauldron, you had to find something to make. You had to make do with what you had available to you, or you had to make the tool yourself. But I still am very much that way. There are some things I do order, but most of what I do is basically what's on hand.
So very like folk magic kind of way, like do it yourself.
Very much. Very, very much so. Which is also a lot easier on the monthly budget.
Oh yes. Now you had mentioned that your before we went live, you had mentioned that your grandparents had grown up in kind of like a Bible Belt area, very Christian. So how did that impact their craft, and did that in turn impact your craft today?
It impacted theirs in that they couldn't practice openly. They had to be very quiet because back then there was still a lot of people that just were absolutely hateful to anyone who didn't believe the way they did. And that it's, you know, they talk about the prejudices and the bigotries and things that go on today. It was very much so for those who practiced outside of the Christian church in the area where they lived. And that to the point where you could have damage done to your property, if not to your own self. And being that they were of mixed race, they were a large part of their heritage was Native American. They lived at a time when you know, the fact that they were Native American, they had to try to hide that. And luckily they were light-skinned enough to be able to hide it, because even that, I remember even as a child in school when it came out that I was Native American or had Native American blood, I was the only kid in my school who was Native American. And there was persecution back then. That was in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
When that happened, where a teacher stood by and watched a bunch of kids pin me down and you know, and the kids were saying, one of the kids was saying, you know, you're so proud of being a redskin, you may as well look like one. And she stood by and watched while they painted me red paint, you know, throwing red paints on me and things like that. And it was just something that there was a lot of things you just didn't discuss.
Yeah.
There was you had a lot more people who were what they now call being in the broom closet. A lot of that going on because it was safe. It was not a safe thing to be open.
Yeah.
To practice your craft. So it had a huge impact. My grandparents would attend a church that was near them once in a while in order to pacify the neighbors, but they had a strong belief in their heritage and in the more paganistic faith base. And so they practiced at home, and that behind closed doors.
Yeah, home is pretty safe. Did you? I'm assuming you got to visit your grandparents. Obviously, when you walked into their place, did you? Would you be able to tell offhand any pagan things, or did they keep that all like really secret and bring it out like at night?
Oh, it was never out because they had neighbors that would come visit. So to walk in their home, you would never know that they practiced. Everything was hidden. Everything was secret because it was just the way it had to be back then in the area where they lived. And living in a Bible Belt area myself, I can't stand it because, you know, it's not something that you're too open about.
Yeah. Do you currently live in a Bible Belt area, or did you since move?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to practice your own craft? Because I know we've had many conversations about each other's crafts, but in your particular area where you live, do you find it difficult to practice your craft openly?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because a lot of the people that live around me are more what you would refer to as your charismatics.
Oh, okay.
And that which takes the Bible thumping to a whole nother level.
It's kind of like the Wiccan reed thumping that we sometimes see on YouTube.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
So when you look at your own craft and you look at the way that you practice today, and I can already tell that you watch YouTube and other witches because, again, we've discussed that, and obviously you watch my channel. But when you look at your own craft and then you look at how some of the witches are showing off their craft and talking about their craft, do you see a major difference in what you would call secrecy as opposed to openness? Or do you also kind of get that vibe of, okay, this particular witch has a lot of secrets, but doesn't mind sharing a few tidbits? Or do you find that most witches are more, I'm going to share everything, including lighting and incense?
I overall, there is a whole lot more freedom to share
Mm-hmm.
than there was back in the day. There are some things that people share that I cringe deeply when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Because some things that are just so sacred to us are so private. I would not dream of ever sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And because it is something very, very personal in your relationship with the deities. And when I see that, I just, I have this knee-jerk reaction of just cringing. But the thing is, one of the greatest things that have come about is the freedom to practice your faith in whichever way you feel is correct for you.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, everybody has to practice in the way that is right for them. If they feel right sharing things would make me cringe, if that feels okay with them, then okay. But it is not something that I would do. But that's where the beauty lies in following the craft, is that you are it is your path, it is your journey, it is your way. And if, as long as it does not show disrespect to the deity, or you are not showing disrespect to yourself, then I don't see any harm. But there is that old-fashioned part of me that does look at some of the things and wonder, what in the world are you doing?
Can I ask you, like, what are some of these things that you personally might see that you're like, why are you sharing this? What are you even doing?
The one that comes to my mind right off the top of my head is when people start leafing through their grimoires in video.
Yes.
That is something that it just, and this is probably a product of my raising and my experiences over 40 years, but that is something that is immensely personal. I mean, that is a record of your craft, of your experiences. And it would be like, to me, it's like if someone asked you to share your private diaries and leave a video. There's people who would have no problem with the idea of sharing a grimoire, but yet at the same time, don't ask them to show a private diary.
Yeah.
But to me, if you're not willing to share one, why are you sharing the other?
This is very true. I used to, and I still kind of do sometimes, watch a lot of these people who share their grimoires and share like the stuff in them. And I have found, at least personally and based on what I've seen, is that everybody's grimoire is pretty much the same thing. You've got your Wiccan read, you've got all of your elements, you've got the moon phases, you've got this, that, and the other thing, and it's pretty much all the same. It might be different art styles, different ways of storing it, but it's all the same. And personally for me, I will never share my grimoire with anybody. Some of the spells that I share on my site or on my YouTube channel are from my grimoire, but I'm not going to read them out from my grimoire because they always change and they always evolve. And I'm sure you've seen that with your own spells and your own grimoire. Right. They're always changing and evolving. And I find it personally, and again, in my opinion, to be very disrespectful to the craft when people share their very private grimoires with everybody. They think that it should be something that's public. And I mean, if you're with a coven or whatever, that's one thing. But if you're a solitary practitioner and you're like, hey, everybody, let's flip through my grimoire. I mean, those are spells you've come up with. Those are incense and potions and so on and so forth that the spirits or your deity or whatever entity you work with has helped you come up with. So why are you sharing that?
Well, it goes back to, the fact that it's all personal. And if the person doing it feels comfortable with that, then okay. But it's, but then each of us has to make the decision for ourselves on, is this something I would do?
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a lot of them share some of the same type of information as far as the elements and the lunar cycles and the uses for various herbs and plants and such like that. As far as like what I refer to as your reference information.
Yeah.
But where I cringe is when as they're leafing through, you're seeing pages that are more private.
Yeah.
As far as the workings. But if they feel comfortable with it, more power to them. But
Exactly.
One thing, you made the comment that you feel it's a disrespect to the craft. Anything that you're doing in your craft that is right for you as an individual in your workings is not a disrespect to the craft.
Okay.
Okay, because because then we're getting too much into being the Wicca Police.
That's true.
Or the police. Okay, whatever bindings you're wanting others to follow, rules I refer to as bindings, mm-hmm. because you are binding what the freedoms that someone can have.
Yeah.
Whatever bindings you place on others, you have to expect that the bindings can also be placed on you. There may be an area where you feel very comfortable, in what you share. As, oh no, you don't share that. And you would not want them to come into you and say, hey, you need to stop that.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't want them to put that binding on you. And so if you want to have the freedom to practice as you do, then you have to allow them the freedom to practice as they do.
This is very
true.
Yeah, this is very true. Like, it is a two-way street. But would you agree that there are certain aspects of one's craft, regardless of how comfortable they are, that they should not share? For example, you won't talk about your deity as I won't publicly share or show my saint's altar, because I find that to be very disrespectful. So is there certain aspects of the craft that should not be shown or shared, regardless of how comfortable you are with sharing other aspects?
I think what we should hold back on are the things that we hold most sacred.
Okay.
And that what is sacred to us is the things that are the most personal to us, but also too, if you're going to share something and your deity's like, oh no, you don't,
mm-hmm.
and you try to do it anyway, you're disrespecting them.
Yeah.
And so that's where you have to really be mindful.
Yeah.
In what you're doing.
That makes sense.
But I would never tell anybody you can't do something because I'm not about to have somebody come and tell me you can't do what you're doing either.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, I would never want to actually go up to, say, somebody like yourself and be like, hey, you can't share that Yule incense blend because that's, sacred to this time of year. It's up to us individually and our spirits. I mean, for me personally, my spirits will tell me you should share this or you should not share that, or so on and so forth. And so for me, it's all dependent upon what the spirits want me to put on YouTube and what they don't. So I understand totally where you're coming from.
Yeah, and and we have to remember that anything that we do share, and that others who share are probably feeling the same way about what they're doing. Okay, and so I put the bindings on anybody, that I would, because I wouldn't want them to bind, to put rules and bindings in front of me. That's one reason why I'm a solitaire.
This is true. So speaking of which, we kind of joked a little bit about the Wicca Police. I know when I first started, I didn't have the internet or the resources. All I had, ironically enough, was Charmed, the television show, which I absolutely love to this day. And we all know how fake and Hollywood magic that is. But I'll
have to take your word for it because I've never seen it.
Oh, you should. It's absolutely amazing. I had that, and I for my 18th birthday got a Scott Cunningham book on solitary Wicca, and I personally, that's all I had. Those two items, and I remember living with this lady who brought home. She would bring home loose herbs. She would bring home patchouli, red sandalwood, and peppermint. And in fact, that's what I'm burning here tonight. And those were what I call my original three. Those were what got me into the craft. The smell alone just felt very magical. So I remember watching hours of Charmed and flipping through this book and kind of like trying to soak up as much as I could based off of the 180 or 200 pages that I could of all of this information. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on when you first started as opposed to now. Like, we've got all of this information we've got every YouTuber who's in the witchcraft that we can think of, from the popular Lady Grave Dancer all the way down to Billie Jane, who just started yesterday. We've got everybody. We've got all of this information. Other ones I could think of are like the Blue Witch and so on and so forth, Ravenflower. So what are your thoughts on when you first started as opposed to now? Do you find it too open, too broad, too misleading, or do you find it the opposite?
I find it exciting, actually, because there is just a plethora of information out there that we didn't have when I started, and that we were really limited. We didn't have all the books and things. I mean, when I started at a bookstore, if I Scott Cunningham, you just type of books. They would, because even though the books may have been published, and that there wasn't a whole lot of stories that would have carried them, because of the fact that they still had the attitude that that all who practiced Wicca and that were devil worshippers, and you sacrifice that, and I mean, there was even a something that would be said. I remember as a kid, we had people's cats started coming up missing. They said, well, someone around here's got to be a witch because they're using them for animal sacrifices. There was just that attitude.
Yeah.
We didn't know all that. And so, but the information that's available today is so out there that there's almost nothing that you could be looking at. And I see that as exciting to make it easier. Starting out today than what I had when I started. On the flip side of that, I think people need to be cautious what resources they're using, because there may be out there accurate you might think they are.
Yeah.
And so really have to be careful and, read it, but you have to listen to hear what resonates inside you. Is this a truth? This is where working with your deities, because can have their guidance in what is onto and what is something I should throw away.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I know about a couple of years ago when I first started this channel, the only ones that I really knew of in this witchy community were Ember Honeyraven and the Lady Gravedancer, and I didn't really know of any other witches or any other sources of information. And over the last about a year or so, I started to find all these other new channels and sites and so on and so forth of information. And it's very true that we as witches have to listen to our intuition. Now, not all of us work with deities, and I wanted to get your opinion on that and how you can go about, I guess, learning your craft. Because on one hand, it's all kind of intuition based in a way. Like there's definitely lots of books and lots of resources, but as you had said, you have to listen to your heart. You have to listen to your intuition. So what if you don't work with a deity? Is there a difference in your opinion in practicing the craft as opposed to practicing the craft with, say, oh, I don't know, Hecate or a saint or whatever? Do you think there's a difference there?
I'm not really sure there would be much of a difference, other than when it comes except for in one area, and that would be you know, I cannot wrap my mind around the idea of how you would practice and not have some kind of spirit guiding you. Okay, because a lot of what we do relies on working with the spirits. And it doesn't matter if it's a deity or like in the Native American traditions, they have the spirit animals, and they have the totems that they work with. And, you have your spirit guides. In using a Native American term, you have your spirit guides.
Yeah.
Now, the spirit guide may not be a deity to you that you're worshiping them, but you are working alongside them in your craft and in your workings. And I think it can be done, but in some way the spirits have to be involved for it to really feel effective. You can practice without a deity. I've seen Native Americans who do it very well, but they still acknowledge that there's a great spirit. They just don't work with the great spirit when it comes to their practice, and that they rely on their spirit guides instead.
Yeah, and I've heard about shamans who will practice without calling upon a deity, and I've only seen a couple of witches on YouTube who will talk about practicing without a deity, but it seems, at least in my opinion and from what I've seen, that everybody is working with the popular deities. Hecate or whomever, it doesn't really matter. If like a lot of people will say the same name of a deity over and over again. And I wanted to get your opinion on that. I've seen, when I first started a year ago, there was a huge rise, and it might have been dying down a bit, but a huge rise around Hecate. And then about 6 months later, I saw a huge rise around the Morrigan, and 6 months later around Medusa, and so on and so forth. And I wanted to get your opinion on the popularity of certain deities and what that might mean to you, because I know you work with at least one of them, which I won't mention, but I know you work with one of them. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are on new witches coming into the craft and talking about working with X, Y, or Z.
I think in some cases, not all, but of course, but in some cases, I think that somebody coming into the craft, if they go into a witchy store and they only find books on Hecate, then they're going to gravitate toward working with Hecate. And so it's a case of what information is available at the time when they're searching.
Mm-hmm.
You feel a pull or a call to a certain deity, and then it's up to them to follow through with that and study up on that deity and see, is that the one that they should be with.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I think a lot of it comes into play when, as far as what information is available to the person at that time. You know, if the only deity you've ever heard of is Hecate, then that's the one you're going to gravitate toward in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. Now, in relation to that, let's say you live in an area where the only witching store has nothing but information on Hecate, and you go in there and you're reading through and flipping through and looking at figurines and so on and so forth. You reach out to Hecate, and she's like, "No, I don't want to work with you." What tip would you give to that particular witch who's like, "Well, the only witchy store celebrates Hecate, and she doesn't want anything to do with me"?
I would advise that they study the different lexions,
Okay.
and you know, and then see which, because as you're studying about the the one that is right for you, from the various areas, it could be anywhere from the Celtic, the Greek, the whoever, which one. There's going to be one that's going to stand out and really resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the time when you do a lot of meditations and a lot of what you would probably refer to as the mundane.
Yeah.
That, okay, is this who I need to be listening to? And is this the one I am to be working with? But you have to let your intuition guide you.
Yeah.
But if the one that the information is most prevalent on in your area is not resonating, then it's up to you to go and look at the others and study and see which one really seems to speak to you.
Yeah.
It might be that none of them will, and you are going to be working without a deity. And you have to be open to that as well.
Yes, this is true. I know for the longest time I didn't have a deity, especially when I was doing the YouTube stuff. I didn't have any particular deity, and it wasn't until late last year that the saints made themselves available to me. And I found it interesting and difficult to work without a deity because I was manifesting a lot. Now, I did work with the spirits, but I didn't have any one particular spirit. It was just the spirits as we know them. And so I found it very difficult because there wasn't a lot of resources out there on working without a deity. And I just found it very odd, because everybody I was watching was either with Hecate or whomever. And I was like, am I the only one without a deity? Like, how do I find one? Which was going to lead me to my next question of a lot of new witches who come into the community are like, which deity should I work with? And it's like, how do you answer that question? Or do you?
My answer would be you work with the one that calls to you. That whether you're reading something and something just really hits home with you, you're gonna, when you're reading about the different deities, and that you're gonna know, on some level when you've hit on the one that is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's like, okay, you need to start reading, and finding, and the one that you should be with. It can be a frustrating process, especially if
true.
Especially in today's society where we are such a microwave society. People want the answers at the click of a mouse.
Yeah.
And it's not that way. We have to be willing to really search out and it's not out of the possibility that you can go and you can do your meditations and ask for be made known to you.
Mm-hmm. So me and you had conversations in the past about a nameless deity, and I wanted to get your opinions on the, I guess I would call it disrespect. So we'll use Hecate as a common example. When she came about, a lot of the more well-known witches in the community were or are working with Hecate, and you would see a rise in popularity. A lot of people were wanting to work with that particular deity, saying that they were. So if you have close friends and you tell them about the particular deity that you work with, and then all of a sudden a week later, you know, they're reaching out or talking to or working with that deity, do you feel it's disrespectful to you and your craft or to that particular deity in general when, you know, that person is like, oh, I see X, Y, and Z, and it's like, is that this particular deity? Do you ever just shake your head and be like, oh my God, what is wrong with you?
I honestly, I'm a very much of a live and let live type person. If I'm talking and they just get all excited about a deity and they're just going off, I'm like, okay, that works for you,
Yeah.
you know, and I walk and I just carry on with what it's only important to me if I make it important to me. And I look at it as, is what they're doing, does it have any influence on what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
And, 99.9% of the time, the answer is no.
Yeah.
Therefore, it really isn't an issue with me.
Yeah.
They can do what they want. I'm gonna follow the practice that I've had, and in my own way, in the way that has worked for me for all this time. I'm not really bothered by what other people say or do.
Yeah. I've had a few brushing with other people's deities, either visiting or making themselves known. And I've honestly been scared shitless, like just out of my fucking mind. Like, who are you? Why are you here? Like, what the hell is going on? And personally, I find with the saints, a lot of the other people's deities who might come around because they're curious, so they want to know what I'm about or whatever the case may be. They come around, and then the saints get all huffy puffy. And it's actually kind of interesting. Like you get a little scared, and then you watch the interaction between the saints and this other deity or whatever that deity might be, and it's like they're just like puffing their chest out, and I'm just like, oh, okay, well that's fun and exciting.
Yeah, and it's fun to just let them deal with it. It's like, let me know when I need to be involved, but otherwise you guys got it.
Yeah, there was and you already know about this. Without going into too much detail, there was a time I reached out to a specific deity that we both know, and the saints got a little huffy over that, and I was like, okay, we're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know a little bit about, we've talked about this a couple of times, just briefly, what we call the Wicca Police, and the people who say your grimoire needs to be called a Book of Shadows, or your Book of Shadows needs to be called a grimoire. And I wanted to get your opinion on the people who are what we would call Wicca thumpers. Not them or anything, but just trying to understand where they might be coming from, as opposed to where I wouldn't call myself a traditional witch or a folk, like I would call myself more of a folk magician, but like we're people who, we work with what we've got. We don't really care about black or white. There's no such thing as dark magic. It just is magic. You take care of your own, you protect your family, your house. So I wanted to know what your thoughts and opinions are on people who are very highly opinionated on ways of practicing and ways of keeping records.
Oh boy.
I know you've got a lot of opinions.
Well, it's just a matter of, it's like, okay, how many toes am I going to step on when I open my mouth?
Oh, just take a sledgehammer to them.
Well, I think that sometimes people get so excited about what they're doing and they don't want to be told they're wrong. So they're going to tell everybody, you got to do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that it's like a validation.
Mm-hmm.
That this is the way you do it. I'm right. You do it this way. If you don't do it the way I do, you're wrong. Okay. I think a lot of times it's just something personal that they're working on in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe at some point they will. But, I just, I actually sometimes just have to sit back and just like, really? With everything going on in the world today, you're going to make an issue of somatics.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get a little bit hyped up over things that really are not that important. I really don't think the spirits are going to, smack you upside the head because you call your grimoire a book of shadows or you call your book of shadows a grimoire.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it really matters to them.
Yeah.
The only time that somatics really has an impact, it has been when you're in a coven or a group, and it's like, no, we do it this way. We have this rule. This is the way you do it. But in general, though, I really don't think the somatics matter. As far as what you call your book.
Mm-hmm.
Important thing is, what is the book to you?
Yeah.
And that you're the only one who is using it. You're the only one who's reading it. You're the only one who knows what your intent is for your book. So who is it that has a say over what that book is called?
Mm-hmm. So in relation to that, you had mentioned earlier that there really to kind of summarize it, there is really no right or wrong way to practice your craft.
Mm-hmm.
And that there are people out there who think there are a right or a wrong way to practice your craft. What do you think leads those people to have those strong oppositions towards saying what you're doing is wrong as opposed to what you're doing is right?
I thank them for their opinion and I go my own way.
Well, that makes sense.
It's like, thank you for caring enough about what I'm doing that you have an opinion of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to do it the way the spirit guides me to do it.
Yes, this is true.
And the spirits have a much more important role than the opinion of someone you meet, say, on the internet.
Yeah. Do you ever think that there might be a wrong, and I put wrong in quote, way to practice the craft?
I think that anything you do that is a slap in the face to the spirit you're working with is wrong.
Okay.
Okay, you go to your spirits for their aid, for their guidance. It should be a relationship built on respect for them. And if you do something that is in direct opposition to what they ask you to do, then you're showing disrespect. And I think that's wrong. It also lends to them causing you a little mischief later on.
Mm-hmm.
And that in whether or not, how quickly they'll work with you again when you really want them to work with you. But there are, I think what makes any practice wrong is what is your intent behind it. Okay, this is where the so-called dark magic comes about, is if you have dark intent, you're working dark magic.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things we really have to be careful of is, if you allow that to become a focus in your workings, over time, it's gonna start to overtake you. You really have to balance yourself. You really have to keep yourself, in check on that. And this is where sometimes I know some people work their best magic when their emotions are really high.
I know I do.
But if I'm really pissed off, that is not the time for me to be doing a new working, because that that negative energy that I have in my anger is going to be infused into that intent, and I just don't want to be responsible for it.
Yeah, I know personally for me, if I'm very angry or pissed off, usually the type of workings that I will do will be towards the object of what I'm angry or pissed off at, and there's usually a particular reason. I always kind of preach the whole do everything in the mundane that you can. For instance, that you may have seen, I dealt with some people who lived under me who were very noisy and just very like rude and disrespectful, and I did everything in the mundane world to get rid of them, to get them to stop. And when it didn't work, I decided to use magic and get them out, and it worked. I always find that we as magicians or witches or whatever we want to call ourselves have to be very centered in the mundane. You know, that means having relationships and jobs and a life essentially away from the altar table, as well as having that time to spend at the altar table. Because personally, when I find that you're very balanced both in the mundane and the magical, it's harder for other witches or negativity or whatever the case may be to latch onto you, and for other spirits and so on and so forth to latch onto you, because you are grounded in both worlds. And it's like, well,
right.
What's the purpose?
Well, they can only latch on to you if you give them an opening.
True.
Okay. So if you are well grounded in what you're doing, then there you have closed up the gaps, openings that they could focus on.
That makes a lot of sense. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on. I just lost my train of thought. Holy crap. I was like, I had the question, and then it was like, I'm going to leave you now. And I was like, wait, come back.
It's that blonde streak in your hair, Adam.
I know, I'm blonde, and I'm just like, oh God. I'm planning to change this color eventually. I'm just like super lazy. I remember when I was dyeing my hair when I was 18, every like week it would be a different color. Almost every 3 days it would be a different color. And now it's like every couple of months I'm like, oh, I gotta do something, and I'm lazy and I don't care. And so oh, what was my question now? I totally lost it. We have about 10 more minutes, and I'm gonna ask the chat if there's not many people in chat. There's like 3 people, but we have 8 people watching.
I bored them all away.
No, you've entertained them, and they're just like blown away by your educational value. So if there's anybody in chat that has questions, you know, ask them now. Put them in cap locks with a Q at the beginning, so that I know, just in case we get a rush of people. I don't know. So I was going to ask you if you have any questions for me. I know this has like been a one-way street, but we should turn it into a two-way street.
Well, just in your own practice, what are some things that, looking back, what are some changes you've made in your practice that you kind of look back now and you say, why did I do that?
Oh, honey, we're going to be here till next spring. I remember, so when I was 18 and I started this, as I've already said, I started with the Charmed and the Scott Cunningham book and kind of going through that. And I definitely realized that the Wiccan path was not for me. So that was the first change. I found it too restricting, because I found in my practice, there are going to be times when, you know, that neighbor's being too noisy and you've tried 1,000 times to shut them the fuck up and they're just not going to. So you're like, I'm going to shut you up myself. But from when I was practicing in those days, you know, Wicca was just very, very tight on what you can and cannot do. It had its own commandments in a way. And so I couldn't, yeah, like I couldn't do what I wanted to do. I couldn't burn somebody's house down magically, of course, without breaking some law or some rule. As I came back to the craft a couple of years ago, I found that I didn't have a lot of resources. So my craft was very basic. Like my earlier videos were very basic and very much what I had around the house, which was good because that taught me to use what I have on hand instead of running to the store and buying the expensive stuff and the bottles and the this, that, and the other thing. But as I started watching people like Ember Honeyraven, the Lady Grave Dancer, and a few others, I realized that I got introduced to this whole world of online shopping for witches. And so I got introduced to a Monterey-based spice company and Mountain Rose Herbs and this, that, and the other thing. And I just bought everything that I could. But I'm finding in the last year of being on YouTube and being in the craft that there's very little of what I've bought that I actually use. So like my staples are like juniper and sage and dragon's blood and frankincense, and I've got all these other herbs like St. John's wort and thistle and this, that, and the other thing that I barely ever use. And I'm like, I found that I started out basic and I got into all of the shopping and the buying of the fancy stuff. And the only thing I don't have is the nails. I'm working on that. But I don't have the fancy nails, but I didn't have all the fancy stuff. And then I'm going back more basic. A lot of these witches that I mentioned, I got to talk to personally. And I even asked them the question of, I've seen your videos where you show off your witchy rooms or whatever the case may be, and you've got all these herbs and crystals and books and so on and so forth. And 99% of them tell me that we don't even use 99% of that stuff. It's like whatever I've got on hand, I'll use. And I found the very same way for myself. Like I just go back to what I have on hand, as opposed to, you know, oh, I got to go buy cloves, or I got to go buy hops, or whatever the case may be. It's just like if I've got paprika and ginger or cinnamon and whatever else, I mean, I can burn your house down or I can heal you. So I found that my craft goes very from basic to expensive back to basic.
Yeah.
I've also found that I've grown a lot as a person, especially in the last year. I've gone through the rough patches, as we all know, and I've come out the other side of that, and I've managed to advance my craft. Like if you watch from the beginning to now, it's like you see this massive growth, and that's why I wanted to do this. It wasn't to share every spell and every incense and every oil that I make, but to show an evolution from how basic my craft is to where it is today and where it's going tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I gotta admit, you know, your videos a year ago were quite funny because I mean, and that if I took a shot of something every time you dropped the F-bomb, I would have been drunk by the time your video was done.
I think I was drunk for half of them. Are you kidding me? No, I remember in the old days, it was, if you don't like this incense, get the fuck off my channel. Yep. All the way up till now, where it's more mellow. I think starting at the beginning, I wanted what everybody else had. I wanted, you know, I looked at the Lady Grave Dancer and she had like 16,000 subscribers and I was starting out and I had 0. And I was whoring my videos out to every subreddit and Facebook group I could find just to get the 50 subscribers I had. I remember last year my goal was to get 50 subscribers and I'd be done. By the end of it, I had almost 1,000, and just this month alone, I've reached up to 1,100. And I never thought I would ever reach 1,000. That was never my goal. My goal was to share. I didn't care if I had viewers. I didn't care if I had people subscribe. I didn't even care if I had comments. And I definitely think that at the beginning I went about it the entirely wrong way, and that's why a lot of my videos today might be missing the ones that a lot of people miss or want to see. I've gotten a few
Yeah.
messages on Facebook where it's like, where did this video go or whatever? And it's like, you know, I've definitely cleaned up the channel a lot.
Yeah.
And by watching a lot of these witches that I admire, I've definitely seen that, you know, I want my channel to be taken more seriously and I want to go in this direction. You know, a similar path, like not similar path in terms of my craft, but similar way of how they do their videos. And I definitely want to go in that direction where it's more like chill and relaxed as opposed to let's rip open a box and have orgasms while we do it.
Yeah, but are you going to be able to do the calm and laid back?
I think in the last 6 months I've managed to do that. It's definitely a lot better than what it was.
Just a lot
Yes,
more vape breaks.
we definitely need to have our vapes.
Yes.
In the last I'd say about 3 or 4 months, since about August or July, I started vaping, and I don't know if you watched any of my chats before that, but I used to smoke a lot,
Yeah.
like a disgusting
Yeah.
amount, and so now I get to just chain vape, and I've got 4 vapes now, and I'm just like, this is my at-home vape, and so I just go all day. So, but I definitely think in the last 6 months it's gotten a lot more mature, a lot more calm, a lot more better than what it was like then, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I've seen the evolution going on, and it's been fun to watch. I mean, there's times when I think back on some of the ones that, you know, the videos that you might cringe at now, that I thought, oh my God, this is hysterical. I mean, I was learning something, but I was also, it was like, oh my God, this guy is over the top.
I remember in,
But you know, but I kept watching because it was just like, you know, I was seeing the change. And when you were going through that bad patch, you know, it just broke my heart to see you go through that, you know, but seeing how you are now coming out the other side of it, and that, you know, it was like a, you know, what some people refer to as a refining fire that you went through, you know, and, you know, you're able to pick up and say, okay, that didn't work. This works. This is where this is where my head and my heart need to be.
yeah.
And move on until the next.
Yeah, I think for me it was more about I had gained a lot of people. Shit hit the fan, and I lost a lot of people, and I needed to take a long break to figure out where the hell am I going and what am I doing. And I wanted to delete my channel. I wanted to start all over again and hope that the past wouldn't follow me. But I knew in my heart of hearts that I could run from Canada to the States and back again, but the past would always be there. So I thought instead, let's start all over again and see where the wind takes us. And I mean, I've had some ups and downs since then, but for the most part, it's definitely more better. It's like I've managed to find a ground to stand on, and one where I can share my craft and not have the judgmental eyes on me. There's definitely a lot of aspects of the past that I miss, and a lot of people from that I miss. But at the same time, it's like you can't walk through hell and keep everything with you. You have to lose a few things along the way.
Well, you come across now as someone who is a whole lot less defensive.
Yes, and that's one thing I had to learn very quickly.
Because you had a major chip on your shoulder for a long time there, and I mean that chip was funny entertainment, but you know, but it's not there anymore the way it was before. Yeah. And I love that.
Sorry, go on.
I said I love seeing that change in you.
Yeah, I found that
little boys growing up.
little
boys growing up.
I found for me, that I think I hid behind a lot of the humor and a lot of the sarcasm and the jokes and the stupidity and the orgasming opening boxes. And I know that some of the more popular people found it funny at first, but as time went on, they found it more tiring and they found it boring and they found it, you know, childish and so on and so forth. And it wasn't until I lost everything that I had that I realized that I hit rock bottom. It's kind of the way I like to compare it is a drug addict or alcoholic who hits rock bottom and finally sees all of the damage they've done. And you can either stay there and just alienate everybody, or you can pick yourself up and find a way to go forward. And I'm a fighter and a survivor for the life that I've lived. Like I've every female that I've come across on YouTube, yourself included, has had some story of their past that is dark and twisty, and a bottle of tequila is needed to get through. Do you watch Grey's Anatomy?
No, I haven't even owned a TV in almost a decade.
Oh, honey, you're missing out on all the references I was going to make. But
I've heard of it though.
I find that every female I've come across has had some dark and twisty life experience that they've gone through, and they've come out a better person. And I see them on YouTube, and they're just this vibrant, happy, you know, I've gone through shit, but I'm here, and I'm able to be positive. And I think I used the humor to hide behind all of the dark and twistiness, and that really came out near the end. And that's when I kind of started to hit rock bottom. And then I decided that why should I be a victim of my own circumstance when I've fought so hard to get this far in life? So why not fight to keep what I consider dear to myself, which is my YouTube channel, which is like, my YouTube channel is kind of like a book of shadows. It's like a public, open, you know, what you get is what you see, and sometimes it's not pretty, and sometimes, as you may have seen in the last couple of days, I'll rip pages out, like 3 or 4 videos might go missing, and it's just like, because they're not worth it. They're not worth putting up there. They're not worth attracting that attention from the other side. So, you know, that's not the person I want to put forward. So, you know, again, sometimes there's gonna be some ups, and sometimes there's gonna be some downs, and then those downs will disappear, and we'll try again.
Right.
So, but yeah, my whole YouTube channel, my craft is all about growing and learning and experiencing and moving forward and trying something. And if it doesn't work, deleting it and trying again. So
sounds good.
We do have some people in chat. So I thought, so we're at 7:13. So we'll go, do you mind if we go till, I think it's about 8:30 your time?
We're good.
Okay, so that'll be about another 15 minutes. So the question here from, I don't even know how to say this name. It's like Codering Miasma or something. What are your thoughts on using or buying herbs from Chinese apothecaries? These places tend to sell a variety of insect-like poisonous spiders, scorpions, etc., and rare herbs like aloes wood.
If it meets the needs of what you're doing, then there's no problem with it, you know. And that if that's the only place you can get what you're needing, then go for it.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I would say. Is whatever it is that you need is pretty much what you need. Like if the spirits tell you to go get a mummified tarantula, then go get one, because apparently you need it for something. I was going to also ask you, what are your thoughts on the monetization of witchcraft? So a good example is, again, you will see a lot of these more known, more popular witches, and not to put them down, we're not trying to do that, but they've got the fancy nails and the fancy hair and a lot of the herbs and crystals and so on. And you see new witches watching them, and they go out and buy these things, and they never end up using them, or maybe they do, we don't know. But what are your thoughts on the monetization and promotion of monetization of witchcraft through people like this, whether they're doing it intentionally or unintentionally?
It really doesn't bother me one way or the other. You know, people are going to spend their money where they want to spend their money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said before, I'm fairly easygoing on a lot of things. You know, if it doesn't apply to what I'm doing, you know, I really don't let myself get twisted up in a knot over it.
Yeah.
Now, when what I would, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a situation where that would really bother me. And I think the only time it would bother me is if the person doing the selling was doing it in a knowingly deceiving. You know, but there again, you know, karma is going to take care of that. But as far as, you know, all the monetary part of it, that really, you know, people are going to spend money where they're going to spend their money. Mm-hmm. If they don't buy from this place, they're going to find it somewhere else. What would bother me more is the question of why do they feel they need to buy all these things in order to do something that really can be done very basic.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, some people can go broke trying to keep up with what everybody says you need.
Yeah,
you broke, but you really don't have to.
Yeah, and I remember when I started my YouTube channel, all I had were kitchen spices, and that's all you really need. Like, I mean, there are so many herbs in kitchen spices. I mean, you've got clove, and if you go to your candy store, you've got licorice. So right there, you can do a commanding oil or a commanding spell or whatever. And you've got basil for money, and you've got, you know, mint, and you can even get sage from, you know, your grocery store. But I remember when I started this, Ember Honeyraven introduced me to Monterey-based spice company. No, actually, that was tequila. But she introduced me to Mountain Rose Herbs. Ember Honeyraven did, and it wasn't even a necessity to keep up with them. It was this whole new avenue of
right.
What, like frankincense, for example, or a massive thing of sage, and then one of them introduced me to New Age imports, and I just decided to investigate the site one day, and I was like, holy shit, I can get smudge sticks, and I can get this, and I can get that. And for me personally, it wasn't about trying to keep up with these people. It was more about, you've introduced me to places that I don't have in my city to get witchy supplies that I need in my craft. Now, I will admit that a lot of the herbs that I've gotten, I don't even need. I mean, I've got more herbs than God knows what to do with. And I find today my biggest ones are dragon's blood, frankincense, osha root, and patchouli, and I can do everything with that. And I find it interesting to watch a lot of new witches who watch some of these more quote-unquote popular witches, and they go broke trying to keep up. And it's like, if you actually take the time to talk with these witches, you'll find that a lot of the time they buy these things not because they need them, not because their spirits say buy this, but because they just want it. And
well, I think sometimes though that it's more a case of someone who is new may watch a video of a working whatever kind, and they see the person using certain items, and they think, oh, to do that, I have to have those exact items. I can't substitute something else for that and it still work. And so it's that misconception. It's basically, you know, they're trying to, you know, like if you use like 20 different herbs in a certain way and to make an incense, they're going to want to go and buy those 20 herbs
Mm-hmm.
to make that same exact incense, where maybe the purpose of that incense, whether it's going to be something you're adding to during your workings or whatever, maybe there's something else that they can use that is going to cost a whole lot less, that may be more readily available to them where they are. And so and that's one reason why I look at some of these incenses and spells and things you can find online. And I look at it like, okay, do I really need to have that ingredient? Do I really need bergamot in that, or can I substitute something else? There's a lot of situations where you can use less costly or more readily available things that you might be able to find. There's a lot of stores that sell bulk foods, bulk spices and things where you can get what you need, and that will do the same exact thing. And that, because what they misunderstand is it isn't always the ingredients that makes that work. It's your intentions behind it.
Yeah.
Your intentions have just as much, if not more, kick to what you're doing than the ingredients you're using. Okay? The ingredients are a tool.
Yeah.
And you can substitute ingredients, but unfortunately a lot of people who are new think that, okay, this is what works for this person, so if I want this to work for me, I have to do exactly the same way they do it. And that's where they get caught up in the purchasing a lot of things that maybe there might be an ingredient in the in that one working that you may never use again, but you're going to end up with a surplus of it, in your shelves.
And I've got a few of those. Surpluses of ingredients like hops and clovers and so on and so forth that I've used maybe once or twice.
Well, if you've got hops, you can always learn how to brew your own.
This is very true, and I could become an alcoholic. I mean, here we go. So what I wanted to say before I get to this next question that somebody asked is that I know for me, there was a spell. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a book called the 5,000 Spell Book. Got tons of spells in it, and every now and then I'll flip through for inspiration. And I found this one called Flying Devil's Oil, which is an old hoodoo formula, according to the book, that's great for uncrossing and sending back stuff to the caster. And it calls for an ingredient. I can't remember what it is offhand, but I was like, I'm just going to substitute this for whatever. And I have found that a lot of witches on YouTube are starting this trend where it's like, we're going to use, for example, OSHA root. But if you don't have OSHA root, you could go dig up a dandelion root, and that'll work just fine. Because root, at the same time, do the same thing no matter what plant it's from. I mean, it might have different magical properties according to the internet and certain books. But I mean, if you think about it, if you're using a root to bind and you can't get your hands on something like bloodroot, which is like $64 for like a gram of it, you can easily go dig up a root from your backyard and you have a root.
Well, you can also, one of the things that I think a lot of people tend to forget is when people were doing the witchcraft ancient, they didn't have all the sophisticated stuff that we got now.
Yeah.
They didn't have the sophisticated attitudes like, well, these ones hold these properties, these ones hold these properties, this is only good for this type of thing, this is only good for that type of thing. They didn't have the references. If you're wanting to do something that's binding, yes, roots can get, unless you have a tap root that just goes straight down, roots kind of spider out, and they can kind of, well, you look at what they can do, your water pipes, if they come through your pipes, they bind up, But what else can bind up? Wild berry vines.
True. Any kind of vine.
I'm going through
crazy.
Try
Yeah.
going through a thicket. You can substitute something like that. You have, I know one thing that I was going to talk to you about before, and that, but I never got the opportunity, was, and that was before the chat, was you've done in the past a spell, trying to get your boss to pay you on time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, something that came to my mind about that was, have you ever seen the I don't know if you have them up there in Canada, but the thistles that are real super prickly?
Oh yeah, we've got those.
Okay.
All over the prairies.
Okay, but those things, they irritate the skin, they make you itch, you know what they do if they get on you.
Yeah.
They're a pain in the hiney to get off. Well, you can crush up one of those in the mixture that you're making, and it has that same prickly, irritating. I'm gonna make you itch until you do this. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you look at what's around you, and you look at the property of it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
does it affect you if you are in contact with it, or you're in the proximity of it? Flowers are very sweet and everything, so they're really good for the sweetening type work. But then you have your things that are sour, and that put a bad taste in your mouth, and you want to get rid of it. You have your prickly things that irritate, or the binding. You look at the property of the plant or the item, and you see where, what kind of work you can do with it.
Yeah, I've also found that so I'll say this last thing before I get to our last question, but
Sure.
I have found that a lot of witches, and again, my opinion based on what I've seen on YouTube and experiences, so this doesn't apply to everybody, but I've seen a lot of witches who will tend to buy the expensive stuff without, as you said, looking around and seeing what's around them, but they'll also only buy. So Scott Cunningham released a book on magical herbs where he states that this herb can be used for X, Y, and Z, and only X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
But if you
Right.
look, that's Scott Cunningham's opinions based on maybe some research he's done or his own experiences of what you can use that herb for. I have found
Exactly.
that sage is not only good for protection, it's good for, darker, whatever we want to call that, magics. It's also good for, money. It's also good for love. It's good for purification. I mean, we get the resonance of what can this herb be used for. Bloodroot, I love the way it turns oil blood red, so I can use that as a substitute for blood magic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that if you were to take the time and put your books aside, put the internet aside, put YouTube aside, and just focus on what the herb smells, feels, what it does to your skin, it'll do those same things to your target or to whatever it is that you're doing. And at the same time, I think with the advance of technology and information, we've missed out on our intuition, as well as whispering to the herbs and saying, okay, you're sage, you're meant for this, but I want you to do this. These are my,
right. Well, I think a lot of that comes from just how easy it is to just get on the computer and order whatever you're wanting.
Exactly.
Or to a shop. But, I live about 85 miles from the nearest witchy shop. So it's not exactly convenient.
Yeah.
So I do it the old school. I get what I have, and if I need, now when I happen to be out there, do I take advantage of it? Absolutely. And I get the things that I can't find local.
Exactly.
But the thing is that, I think it's more an act of convenience.
Mm-hmm.
And that for people, they take advantage of the convenience, and but it's like, okay, but what happens if you are unable to go to a shop? Yeah. Let's say, whether it's something financial or whatever. something happens where you're not able to go to a shop, does that mean that your workings stop? You know, how are you going to adapt? You know,
Yeah.
That's one of the skills that I do have concern with a lot of people. You know, is if something happened where you could not afford to go to a shop, would you still be able to continue just using what you have available to you local? Even if it means, like, you know, going for a walk in a wooded area and gleaning.
Yeah.
You can glean so much, you know, just on walking in nature, that that will do just as well, if not better in some cases, than what you buy.
Well, because when you're going out there and you're looking for certain herbs, or you're looking for whatever, you've got that intention of what you want to use it for. So you're already putting that intention into your spell, whatever it is that you're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
well, our last question for the evening is, do you have any suggestions on ways to hone in on one's craft as a beginner? So basically the question is what tips do you have for a beginner in this modern day?
Okay. I would caution them first to limit their exposure to a range of ideas from a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's too easy to become like a magpie and go for every shiny object you see. Oh, I like this. I like this. I like this.
Yeah, I've done that.
It's so spread out that you don't really know where you don't have a ground.
Yeah.
You know, and that. So I would first, I would definitely learn the art of meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I would, and then start reading. Read some books on crystals. If it resonates with you, okay, you know that crystals are going to be important in your workings. So there you go. You know, study the deities. You know, learn about them and see which one resonates with you. But you definitely want to at least find yourself a good reference book on the uses of herbs. You definitely want to have that, because that is, you're going to be using herbs a lot.
Yep.
Workings. And that, but I would just, you know, follow your heart, follow where your intuition is telling you to go. And that's where the meditation really helps, because you can reach out to the spirits to guide you. And just don't be in too big of a hurry. This practice is not something that is a microwave situation.
Nope.
It's not something where you're going to get instant gratification.
It's like a pot roast. It has to be cooked over time.
Right. Exactly. It's something that really takes a lot of time. And I liken it to a fine wine. You know, a fine wine takes time to age and to get that right body that you want it to have and flavor you want it to have. And the craft is no different. You have to take your time with it. You have to, and you have to study and see what resonates and what doesn't. The things that don't resonate with you, just set it aside. If it's something that is you feel drawing you, then that's something that you should pay attention to.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so we are completely out of time, and I would like to thank everybody for joining us today, and I would like to thank the Miss Luna Walks Alone for joining us, and I'll get her to stay on after I hit the stop broadcast button. But I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and if you have any further questions, please put them in the comment section once this video gets uploaded, and I'm sure she'll be around to answer any of those questions in the comment section. I know I'll be around to answer any questions that you guys have. And until next time, my fabulous little tubies, I hope to see you soon, probably in the new year.